place for Father's Day is every day if your car has fender skirts and calls you daddy. This is Rip Roaring Garage. I'm Alex, and I got a really important episode. A lot of channels have been reporting that the markups are gone. They are gone. Back to normal. Just buy the car that you want and don't worry about insane dealer markups, ADM, or whatnot. What I'm here to tell you is that may not be the case. Now, we'll want to preface this with a lot of the channels here. In fact, I'm going to be showing one mostly because I respect the guy and I just have a different opinion, and we're men, we can talk out our differences and where we disagree. He may be wrong, I may be wrong. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I want to see you get the best deal for the car you want. And even if it's not the best deal, sometimes our time is more valuable than our money. So do what you got to do. So I've mentioned OC Motivator. Brad had a video about Hellcats, Scat Pack prices falling. Finally, no more markups.
Hyundai Tucson versus Subaru Forester.
There's your marketing money at you because none of our people care about Hyundais or Subarus. Okay.
Yes, it is.
I don't want to put him on an unflattering face. There, that's a little better. So, Brad here, he's talking about markups. He's kind of been in the same boat as me, as many of you guys that want to get one of these cars but can't afford the insane 50 grand markup. And even if you could afford the payment, the issue becomes, how do you finance it? Bank will not finance markup. The way it works is they typically want that down payment to mitigate their own risk. Car on their wholesale spreadsheets will show that if it's got 6 months, let's say typical repo time frame, will have 90% value still. So they only want to give 90% of that value so they can retain it if they got to sell the car at auction. However, when you add 50 grand, that muddies the water, because even if it's pristine, brand new, they can't justify it on their books as being 70 plus 50K. So typically, dealership will ask for that cash as a down payment. Now, a lot of the dealerships went nuts, asking even more. We got bidding wars. We're seeing that with the demons. Just 50K to sit at the table and silent auction. Whoever offers the most, you don't even know what the other guy's bidding, which is meant to squeeze every little dollar out of people. I hope Brad doesn't take offense to this. This is just my opinion. So when I tell you that the markups will return, that means that I saw something, okay? I have no interest. I'm a tiny little channel, so I'm looking out for you guys, right? So we have to go back even beyond 2023, right? We have to go back to the midterms. Why the midterm? What happened in the midterms, you ask? Well, in that time frame, if you guys remember, because the economy was on everybody's mind, people were asking, hey, you're gonna fix the economy and all this, and the current administration kept saying economy's great, it's doing fine, it's booming, it's yada yada yada, nothing wrong. What happens when the economy is booming? People invest. And a lot of people don't do their research, don't even know fundamentals of investing and how the market moves. So they just throw their money in whatever thing is out there. What they don't do is invest in bonds. And when you have a looming bond crisis, you start to worry. That's when we saw in 2023, White House starting to talk about how the economy is cooling, and we're having articles like this, navigating the economic storm. Worry, economy, ooh, scary. What do you do? Batten down the hatches. Well, typically, people will invest in bonds, the safe alternative. And that prevents a bond collapse, like we recently saw with California, that has most of its pensions invested in funds that are either ESG or bond markets. And if you have a bond collapse, people don't get their pensions. And that scares people. So what I'm here to tell you is that the economy is not as bad as even I thought. So I'm okay with admitting that I was wrong. SVB collapse and implications for business. All right. I'm not going to go through everything, but let's go through a couple of the points. And like I said, there's a lot of, let's say, incentivized messages they want, i.e. saving the bond market. So banks are still borrowing from the Fed to remain liquid. And this has stabilized at an elevated level. So in other words, banks have more cash on hand. Okay, they should be lending then, right? Why are they not lending? Policymakers are considering a variety of changes following internal reviews by the Fed and FDIC and yada, yada, yada. Credit spreads remain narrow and liquidity appears to be adequate. Now, that's not exactly comforting. Markets are still awaiting more shoes to drop. And again, a lot of these things are to instill that kind of fear that you should go buy bonds, buy bonds, buy bonds. So take that with a grain of salt. However, looking at some other resources here, Cox Automotive, now they're like a financial publication that does car stuff, whatever. Auto credit availability shifted in March, impacted by banking crisis. In March, which featured the failure of several banks, access to auto credit loosened slightly, according to the Dealer Track Credit Availability Index for all types of auto loans. However, the aggregate measure masked varied moves. I can't read. Aggregate measure masked varied moves. What? Am I having an aneurysm? Who wrote this? However, the aggregate measure masked varied moves happening in the vehicle channels and by lender. Okay, the all loans index increased 0.2 to 98.2 in March, reflecting that auto credit was easier to get in the month compared to February. Even with the increase in March, access was tighter by 5.5% year over year and compared to February 2020. Access was tighter by 1.0%. And they're going to give you a nice little graph here where it shows this lending availability and the peak and the valley here. Okay. Banks were afraid of becoming SVB. If a bank run would occur at your normal small bank and you have no cash to give them, the tellers have nothing to give, people go on social media and a panic ensues. Next thing you know, they're taken over by the Fed and JP Morgan Chase buys them out. They're left like, what happened now? So the result of this was, like in this previous article, the liquidity was adequate. Banks were holding on to liquidity, were holding on to cash. They were less likely to lend money out. That's July 2020. And we're seeing that dip here, January 23 up until March. There's that little dip. Okay. The dealership, right? They're left with an inability to move these cars. If their client can't buy the car because the bank won't lend it, even if they're qualified and there's no other red flags financially, what do? Well, you got to sweeten the pot. And the way you do that is by saying, okay, you had the 50K or whatever markup, take that, put it towards the price of the car, and we're going to drop on the markup. We got to move something. Because while the dealer can afford to sit on the cars, the salesman can't. They work on commission. And if the dealership is fine waiting 6 months until they find that right buyer, their salesmen are going to quit. Because like, look, I got to make a sale. I need a commission because I can't survive on the base salary. So they decide we'll move some of them. Okay. Another issue that I saw, and I spoke to several dealers, okay? And one of the things they told me was their hotshot salesmen, the superstars, the guys that move the big commission cars had taken off. Because right now it's a bit of a sales slump because of the lending, lack of availability of loans, and a lot of the big, heavily marked up cars, the sales were finalized. They decided to take vacations and go off and take whatever, which is fine. No, not judging. Like I would do the exact same thing. And this is where now I'm adding a little bit of speculation on my part. You may have some salesmen that are new. They just want to make that sale, get that commission. and they jump the gun and sell a car without the markup. If the sales manager is off and all that, you can have a deal go through. I know because that happened to me. I got a car with zero markup with $1,000 down, and I'm talking about a super stock, not exactly a cheap car. It can happen. And when you have all these factors coming in, you'll have this big dip, and all of a sudden you hear stories about guys that are getting these cars with no markup. I know this personally. A friend of a friend just bought I'm not going to show the photos because I'm going to keep his privacy, but he bought the Shakedown, no markup. You get stories from OC Motivator's channel as well, right? About people buying these cars, getting them for no markup. And he wonders, like, what gives? Is that it? Well, demand is still there. And the supply is limited. In fact, demand is going to skyrocket once the cars are done. The last one, usually they're going to follow it with cameras, signatures from the workers, and all that press. That's going to wake up a lot of other, like, that don't know. It's like, I want one of those. Like, what? They don't make them anymore. What am I going to do? And now they're going to come in on top of this extra demand that we expected. What I think is going to happen is by Q3, we're going to see an increase in markups. Also, I will say that the current practice from dealerships is that they're still selling and advertising with markup. In other words, they're not telling you that, cars is going to be no markup. No. They're still hoping that somebody's going to come in and just, yep, sure, okay, maybe we'll chip off 1,000, 2, 5, whatever, but still pay that markup. It's only if you're very insistent, they'll be like, fine, we'll sell it because, hint, hint, I got to sell this car, you know what I mean? And that's what's creating a lot of this weird contradicting buzz online. Because you go to the dealers, they're saying like, no, we're still selling it. I'm not talking about what the guys that I go to, they know I'm tapped out. I got enough. So they're telling me, it's like, no, we're not selling without the markup. We're okay. And you hear stories of guys that do get them. How? Why? Because of this. Now, the other factor that's interesting, and I can't really show the stuff. Don't ask me where I got it from, but we're talking about the portfolios of a lot of these banks. They want to have these loans on the books because it looks bad if a bank isn't lending. They got to lend their money, right? So you'll have smaller institutions. They go quarter to quarter, year to year. They're afraid. They had this liquidity. Now all of a sudden they're looking back, and that fear of having people do a run on them and not having enough cash on hand has become less than the fear of having this big gaping hole in their books. Now you're going to see banks with an incentive to actually lend. Yes, interest hasn't gone down, although there will be some competition. In fact, I foresee fierce competition, because they need to have these on the books. They can't just have a bank where we don't lend. They make money off of that. They make money from the interest. No loans, no money from the interest. They go under. So they have to. They have to do this. I think that this is going to be a very rough Q3 for these cars. I think the markups might actually go up. I'm not saying this. I have no interest. I don't own a dealership. I don't plan on even selling any cars for a long, long time. The joke is I'm the worst car flipper. I keep buying them and I never sell them. So I just want you guys to be careful that if you do find a dealership that is willing to kind of play ball, don't wait too long. Because you might think it over and, all the typical questions, which are, good to ask if you can, if it's wise, yada, yada. But by the time you think that over, some other guy's going to come in and say, screw it, I'll buy it. And when you go in, sorry, now there's a markup. And I hate hearing those kinds of stories of guys that are missing out. They're just close enough and whatever. Now, that being said, if you're struggling and you're waiting on a raise to figure out if you can afford it or not, there's always the used market. Don't worry too much. I mean, I could kick the bucket tomorrow and then there's a bunch of cars on the market with hardly any miles. Yeah, it's life. That's what happens. But don't stress. Don't panic. Panic people make mistakes. So I kind of want to see you do the right thing and get the cars you want, enjoy them, and not get in the poorhouse. We got t-shirts, remember? 4 elements of heavy metal. I am running a little late on the new ones. We do have a couple of cool designs. So happy Father's Day. Spend time with your kids. Show them how to turn a wrench. Spend time with the cars, because that's how we win long term, and that's how we pass this down. It's our responsibility to make sure car culture continues. And while you're at it, check out the Subscribe Star page. But regardless, it is there. I am here. We're all in this together. And no matter what, just remember that I'm Alex, and this is Rip Roaring Garage, where oil is thicker than blood. Hand me that like, and I hope you have a rip roaring Father's Day.